I sat across from my brother Tyler's new girlfriend Amanda at Sunday family dinner, watching her point at my casual clothes and laugh. She had just finished telling everyone how I probably play video games for a living, while the whole family erupted in laughter around our dining room table. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Dad shook his head with that familiar look of disappointment. Tyler beamed with pride at his witty girlfriend, and even cousin Sarah, who had driven down from Portland, was doubled over giggling. Dad muttered something about me finally needing to grow up and get serious about my future. The familiar sting of being the family disappointment washed over me. But when Amanda casually mentioned where she worked, everything was about to change. Walking up the front steps of my parents' house in suburban Sacramento that October afternoon, I'd actually been looking forward to our monthly family dinner. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves from neighboring yards, and the maple tree in the front lawn had turned that perfect shade of golden yellow that reminded me of childhood Sundays, when things felt simpler. I pushed through the familiar wooden door with its peeling green paint, calling out my arrival to whoever might be listening. The house smelled like Mom's pot roast, the same recipe she had been perfecting for 30 years. Walking through the narrow hallway lined with family photos spanning 3 decades, I caught glimpses of Tyler and myself at various ages. There he was in his high school football uniform holding up yet another trophy, his blonde hair perfectly styled even after practice. And there I was, in most of the pictures standing slightly behind him, darker hair falling across my forehead, always looking like I would rather be somewhere else. Growing up, Tyler had been everything our parents wanted in a son. Star quarterback who led Granite Bay High School to the state championships his senior year, business major at UC Davis, with a 3.8 GPA. And now at 34, he worked in medical device sales for a company based out of San Francisco. He drove a silver BMW, lived in a downtown Sacramento loft, and dated women who looked like they stepped out of fashion magazines. I had taken a different path, one that had never made sense to my family. Dropping out of UC Berkeley during my junior year to start a cybersecurity firm with my best friend Marcus had seemed like insanity to everyone who knew me. While Tyler was collecting business awards and climbing corporate ladders, I was spending 18-hour days learning programming languages, studying digital forensics, and building something from nothing in a cramped apartment above a coffee shop in Oakland. My parents never understood what I actually did for work. When people asked, they would say, "I work with computers," in the same tone they might use to explain that someone collected stamps or played video games all day. The fact that I worked from home, dressed in jeans and hoodies, and rarely talked about my job only reinforced their belief that I was somehow unsuccessful or directionless. What they did not know was that Digital Fortress Investigations, the company Marcus and I built from scratch 7 years ago, now employed 12 specialists and generated more revenue than Tyler's sales position ever would. We investigated corporate fraud, cybercrime, and identity theft for major law firms and Fortune 500 companies across the West Coast. Our client list included names that would make Tyler's medical device customers look small by comparison. But I had learned long ago not to brag about success to people who had already decided you were a failure. The truth was, I had stopped trying to explain my work to my family years ago. Every time I mentioned investigating financial crimes or working with federal agencies, they would nod politely and change the subject back to Tyler's latest sales achievement or whatever new car he was driving. It became easier to let them think what they wanted to think and keep the details of my actual life to myself. So when I walked into the dining room that Sunday and saw Tyler standing next to a stunning brunette in a designer dress, I was not surprised that she immediately sized me up and found me lacking. Amanda looked like every other girlfriend Tyler had brought home over the years. Perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, expensive clothes that probably cost more than most people spend on rent. She was beautiful in that artificial way that required significant time and money to maintain. "Boston, this is Amanda," Tyler said, wrapping his arm around her waist with obvious pride. "Amanda, this is my little brother." She extended a manicured hand and smiled the kind of smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Nice to meet you, Boston. Tyler has told me so much about you." I shook her hand briefly, noticing the designer watch on her wrist, and the way her gaze quickly swept over my faded jeans and plain gray sweater. Within 30 seconds of meeting me, I could see her forming opinions about Tyler's unsuccessful younger brother, who probably still lived with his parents and had never figured out how to dress like an adult. During the first course of dinner, Amanda regaled everyone with stories about her job at some downtown accounting firm. She spoke with the kind of confidence that came from being used to impressing people, describing her role in managing important client accounts and hinting at a major promotion that was supposedly just around the corner. Mom hung on every word, clearly thrilled that Tyler had finally found someone with real ambition and professional goals. But as the evening progressed, Amanda's attention kept drifting back to me in a way that made my skin crawl. She would make little comments about my appearance, asking if I had dressed up for dinner or wondering aloud whether I owned any grown-up clothes. Each remark was delivered with a laugh, as if she was just being playful, but the underlying message was clear. She thought I was a loser, and she wanted everyone at the table to see it too. "So Boston," she said, cutting into her pot roast with surgical precision, "Tyler mentioned you work from home. That must be nice, not having to worry about professional appearance or office politics." The way she said it made working from home sound like an extended vacation rather than a legitimate career choice. I could feel my parents watching me, waiting for my response, probably hoping I would finally admit that my computer work was not really a serious job. "It has its advantages," I replied carefully, not wanting to start an argument during what was supposed to be a pleasant family dinner. "I bet." Amanda continued, her smile widening. "I sometimes wonder what it would be like to not have any real responsibilities or deadlines. Just being able to do whatever you want all day must be incredibly relaxing." Tyler laughed at that, actually, laughed at his girlfriend, mocking his own brother. Mom and Dad exchanged glances across the table, and I could see they were thinking the same thing they had been thinking for years. When was Boston going to grow up and get a real job like his successful older brother? The conversation continued in that vein for another 20 minutes. Amanda would ask seemingly innocent questions about my lifestyle, my living situation, my hobby, that I called a career, always managing to sound concerned rather than cruel. But underneath the sweet tone was a calculating intelligence that enjoyed watching people squirm. She was performing for Tyler and my parents, showing them how easily she could see through whatever act I was supposedly putting on. By the time we reached dessert, I was seriously considering making an excuse to leave early. The humiliation was becoming too much to bear, and I could not understand why Tyler just sat there grinning while his girlfriend systematically tore me down in front of our entire family. That was when Amanda made her first real mistake. Feeling confident from the positive reception her performance was getting, she decided to push a little harder. "You know what, Boston," she said, pointing her dessert fork at me like she had just solved a difficult puzzle. "I think I have you figured out. You are probably one of those guys who still lives in his parents' basement playing video games all day and pretending it is some kind of important work. Am I right?" The entire table exploded in laughter. Tyler nearly choked on his apple pie. Mom covered her mouth, but could not stop giggling, and Dad actually slapped the table with his palm. Even cousin Sarah, who had always been relatively kind to me, was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. But what hurt most was the look of satisfaction on everyone's faces. They were not just laughing at Amanda's joke. They were laughing because they thought she had finally said what they had all been thinking for years. Their relief at having someone else voice their disappointment in me was written clearly across their expressions. "Amanda, you are terrible," Mom said between giggles, but her tone suggested she thought Amanda was terrible in the most delightful way possible. But honestly, Boston, she might have a point. When are you going to start taking your life seriously? The laughter around the table finally died down, but the damage was already done. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as Amanda basked in the approval of my family members, clearly pleased with how well her performance was being received. She had successfully positioned herself as the voice of reason, the person brave enough to say what everyone else had been thinking, but was too polite to express. Desperate to change the subject and salvage what remained of my dignity, I turned toward Amanda with what I hoped looked like genuine interest. So tell me more about your work at Westfield Financial Solutions. It sounds like you really enjoy what you do there. Amanda's entire demeanor shifted as she began describing her role at the accounting firm. Her posture straightened, her voice took on a tone of professional authority, and her eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm people display when talking about something they genuinely care about. Or at least something they want others to think they care about. "Oh, I absolutely love my job." She began setting down her fork and gesturing expressively with both hands. "I manage client accounts for some really major companies in the Sacramento area. We are talking about businesses with millions of dollars in assets, complex financial portfolios that require someone with real expertise to handle properly." She went on to describe various aspects of her work using financial terminology with the kind of casual confidence that impressed people who did not know enough about accounting to question what she was saying. She mentioned handling high-value client portfolios and managing sophisticated financial transitions that required her to work closely with company executives and their legal teams. Tyler gazed at her with obvious admiration, clearly proud to be dating someone who sounded so accomplished and professional. Mom and Dad nodded along appreciatively occasionally, exchanging glances that seemed to say, "Finally, someone in this family knows how to succeed in the business world." But as Amanda continued talking about her job, I began to notice something that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Every few minutes, she would redirect the conversation back to mocking me as if she could not resist the opportunity to contrast her obvious success with my apparent failure. "The thing about working in a professional environment," she said, looking directly at me, "is that you have to understand how to present yourself properly. Clients expect a certain level of sophistication. They need to feel confident that the person handling their money actually knows what they are doing." The implication was clear. Unlike certain people at this table, Amanda understood how to dress appropriately, speak professionally, and command respect in a business setting. She was everything I was not, and she wanted everyone to be absolutely clear about that distinction. "What exactly do you do all day, Boston?" she asked, leaning forward with the kind of fake concern that barely concealed genuine malice. "And please do not say computer stuff, because that could literally mean anything. Are you a programmer, tech support? One of those people who fixes printers?" I opened my mouth to give another vague response about security consulting, but Amanda was not finished. "Because honestly," she continued, "I meet a lot of people in my line of work, and I've never encountered anyone who was this mysterious about their job unless they were either unemployed or doing something they were ashamed of." The words hit like physical blows, not because they were particularly clever or original, but because they gave voice to suspicions my family had been harboring for years. I could see it in their faces as Amanda spoke. They were nodding along, finally hearing someone articulate their own doubts about my career and my life choices. Tyler remained silent throughout this exchange, which might have been the most painful part of all. My own brother, sitting 3 feet away from me, was allowing his girlfriend to humiliate me at our family dinner table without saying a single word in my defense. He seemed to think Amanda's behavior was not just acceptable, but entertaining. Dad decided this was the perfect moment to join the conversation. "Boston, you are 32 years old," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of accumulated disappointment. "When are you going to stop embarrassing this family with your mystery career and get a real job that you can actually talk about?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a cigarette, poisonous and impossible to ignore. I felt myself shrinking in my chair, the familiar sensation of being judged, and found wanting by the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Mom piled on with her own contribution to the discussion. "Amanda has such a bright future ahead of her," she said, smiling warmly at Tyler's girlfriend. "Boston, maybe you could learn something from her work ethic and professional attitude." It was like being attacked from all sides at once. Amanda had successfully turned my entire family against me, positioning herself as the standard by which my failures should be measured. She was successful, professional, articulate, and ambitious. I was mysterious, unprofessional, poorly dressed, and apparently going nowhere in life. Amanda sensed that she had the room completely on her side now, so she decided to press her advantage even further. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice taking on the tone of someone who was about to share profound wisdom. "I think some people are just content to coast through life without ever really challenging themselves. They find some little niche where they can hide from real responsibility, and they convince themselves that they are doing something important, when really they are just watching Netflix all day and living off their parents." The accuracy of her psychological profile was devastating, not because it was true, but because it reflected exactly what my family believed about me. She had managed to articulate their worst suspicions about my character and my life choices with surgical precision. Cousin Sarah, who had been relatively quiet during most of the dinner, chose that moment to add her own perspective to the discussion. "You know, my husband Jake works for a tech startup in San Jose, and he is always talking about how many people in that industry are just pretending to be important, while they basically do nothing all day. It sounds like maybe Boston falls into that category." I wanted to defend myself to explain what I actually did for a living and how successful Digital Fortress investigations had become. But years of family criticism had worn down my confidence to the point where I doubted whether anyone would believe me, even if I told them the truth. They had already decided who I was and what my life looked like. Nothing I could say was going to change their minds. So I sat there in silence, enduring the humiliation and wondering how much longer I could tolerate this before I would have to make some excuse and leave. The worst part was not even the mockery itself, but the realization that my family seemed to genuinely enjoy watching me suffer. They were not defending me because they did not think I deserved to be defended. That was when Dad delivered the final blow of this round. Looking directly at me with an expression of complete exasperation, he said, "Boston, stop making this family look bad. Amanda is trying to be nice by including you in the conversation. The least you can do is be honest about your situation instead of making up stories about having some mysterious, important job." The words landed like a punch to the stomach. My own father was telling me to stop embarrassing the family by pretending to be more successful than I actually was. He was essentially accusing me of being a liar and a fraud, someone who made up stories about his career to avoid facing the truth about his failures. Amanda smiled sweetly at Dad's comment, clearly pleased that her strategy was working so perfectly. She had managed to get the entire family to turn against me without appearing to be anything other than helpful and concerned. It was a masterful performance, and she knew it. Somewhere between the humiliation and the growing anger, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving early or trying to defend myself against accusations, I knew no one would believe I chose to endure the mockery for a little while longer. If my family wanted to believe I was a failure, if they found entertainment in watching Amanda tear me down, then I would let them have their fun. But I was also going to pay very close attention to everything Amanda said about her work. Something about her confidence was beginning to bother me in a way that had nothing to do with her treatment of me personally. She spoke about her job with the kind of detailed knowledge that suggested real experience, but there were subtle inconsistencies in her stories that my professional training had taught me to recognize. Little details that did not quite add up, terminology used just slightly incorrectly, claims about her responsibilities that seemed inflated compared to her apparent age and experience level. Amanda continued holding court at the dinner table, regaling everyone with more stories about her important work at Westfield Financial Solutions. She described herself as someone who managed high-value client portfolios for major Sacramento businesses, handling what she called complex financial transitions that required extensive coordination with legal teams and corporate executives. "The level of trust my clients place in me is really extraordinary," she said, dabbing at her lips with a cloth napkin between sentences. "I mean, we are talking about companies that have been in business for decades, family-owned enterprises that have built their wealth over generations. When they need someone to handle sensitive financial matters, they come to me because they know I have the expertise and the discretion to get things done properly." She went on to mention specific client names, speaking about them with the kind of casual familiarity that suggested intimate knowledge of their business operations. Take Bridgeway Industries, for example. They manufacture specialized equipment for the construction industry, and they have been one of our biggest clients for almost 10 years now. Managing their quarterly financial transitions requires someone who really understands the complexities of their supply chain and vendor relationships. My blood ran cold when I heard that name. Bridgeway Industries was not just any random company Amanda was name-dropping to impress my family. It was one of 3 businesses currently under federal investigation for what appeared to be a massive embezzlement scheme involving fraudulent vendor payments and unauthorized account transfers. Digital Fortress Investigations had been contracted by the FBI just 6 weeks earlier to provide cybersecurity analysis for the case. Amanda continued talking, completely unaware that she had just stepped into extremely dangerous territory. Then there's Coastal Manufacturing down in Stockton. They do metal fabrication for aerospace components, really high-precision stuff that requires government security clearances. I handle all their special account transfers when they need to move money between their various corporate entities. Coastal Manufacturing was the second company on our federal investigation list. The FBI suspected that someone with administrative access to their financial accounts had been systematically stealing money over the past 2 years, using sophisticated methods to cover their tracks and make the thefts appear like legitimate business expenses. But Amanda was not finished yet. She seemed to be genuinely enjoying the opportunity to showcase her professional knowledge in front of people who were clearly impressed by her apparent expertise. Tyler was gazing at her with obvious pride hanging on every word she said about her important work and high-level responsibilities. "And of course, there's Summit Healthcare Group," she added, pausing to take a sip of wine before continuing. "They run urgent care clinics throughout Northern California, and their financial operations are incredibly complex because of all the insurance billing and regulatory requirements. I've been working very closely with their accounting team to streamline their payment processes and eliminate some of the inefficiencies in how they handle vendor relationships." Summit Healthcare Group, the third company on our investigation list, and the one where the fraud appeared to be most sophisticated and extensive. Someone had been creating fake vendor accounts and authorizing payments to companies that existed only on paper, effectively stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars over an extended period of time. The coincidence was too significant to ignore. Amanda was not just randomly mentioning companies that happened to share names with businesses under federal investigation. She was describing intimate knowledge of their financial operations, using terminology that suggested direct involvement in exactly the kinds of transactions that were being investigated for fraud. I kept my expression carefully neutral while Amanda continued talking about her work, but internally, I was experiencing something close to panic. If Amanda was actually involved in the embezzlement scheme we were investigating, then my brother was dating someone who was about to be arrested for federal crimes. Worse yet, my entire family was sitting here being charmed by someone who might be stealing millions of dollars from her clients. Amanda seemed oblivious to any potential problems with her revelations. If anything, she appeared to be gaining confidence from the positive reception her stories were getting. She described her upcoming promotion at Westfield Financial Solutions, explaining how her new position would give her even more access to high-level client transactions and allow her to really make an impact on how the firm handles its most important accounts. Tyler beamed with obvious pride as Amanda talked about her bright future. "She is going to be running that place soon," he said, reaching over to squeeze her hand affectionately. "I keep telling her she could start her own firm if she wanted to, but she loves the challenge of working with such sophisticated clients." The more Amanda talked, the more convinced I became that this was not a coincidence. Her knowledge of the companies under investigation was too detailed, too specific, and too focused on exactly the kinds of financial processes that had been compromised. She was not just an employee at Westfield Financial Solutions. She was someone with administrative access to the accounts that had been systematically looted over the past several months. But the most chilling moment came when Amanda casually mentioned something that made my hands start to shake slightly under the table. "One of the things I really pride myself on," she said, "is my ability to streamline payment processes for our major clients. A lot of accounting firms get bogged down in bureaucratic procedures that slow everything down, but I have found ways to make transactions more efficient while still maintaining all the necessary security protocols." She was describing in her own words exactly the method that had been used to steal money from the companies we were investigating. Someone had found ways to circumvent normal security procedures, making fraudulent transactions appear legitimate, while moving money into accounts controlled by the perpetrator. If Amanda was that someone, then she had just confessed to federal crimes while trying to impress my family with her professional competence. The irony was almost too much to bear. Here I was, being mocked and humiliated for my supposedly unsuccessful career in cybersecurity, while sitting across from someone who might be the very criminal I had been hired to help catch. I excused myself from the table as casually as possible, claiming I needed to use the restroom before coffee was served. Walking through the narrow hallway toward the back of the house, my mind was racing with the implications of what I had just heard. If Amanda was really involved in the Westfield Financial Solutions investigation, then this dinner had just become something much more significant than a family gathering gone wrong. The bathroom was small and outdated with faded blue wallpaper that had been there since I was a teenager, and a tiny window that looked out onto the backyard where Tyler and I used to play catch on Sunday afternoons. But I was not thinking about childhood memories as I pulled out my phone and opened an encrypted text message to Marcus. "Need emergency background check on Amanda Richardson, employee at Westfield Financial Solutions. High priority. Send everything you can find in next 10 minutes. Marcus and I had developed protocols for exactly this kind of situation during our 7 years of partnership. When a case involved potential ongoing criminal activity, we had agreed that personal considerations would always take second place to professional responsibilities. If Amanda was stealing money from federal investigation targets, then I had an obligation to my clients and to the FBI to pursue every lead regardless of how awkward it might make things with my family. While I waited for Marcus to respond, I used my phone to access the secure server where we stored all our active case files. The Westfield investigation folder contained hundreds of documents, but I was looking for something specific. Bank transfer records, digital signatures, employee access logs, anything that might help me confirm or disprove my suspicions about Amanda. My phone buzzed with Marcus's response faster than I had expected. "Amanda Richardson, age 28, employee ID number 7741 at Westfield Financial Solutions. Administrative access to client accounts, including Bridgeway Industries Coastal Manufacturing Summit Healthcare Group. Digital signature appears on suspicious transactions dating back 18 months. Sending detailed report now." The room seemed to spin slightly as I read those words. Amanda did not just work for the company we were investigating. She had direct access to the exact accounts that had been compromised, and her digital signature was connected to fraudulent transactions going back more than a year. This was not a coincidence or a case of mistaken identity. I was having dinner with a federal crime suspect. Marcus's detailed report arrived as a series of encrypted files that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Amanda had started working at Westfield Financial Solutions 2 years earlier, beginning as a junior account coordinator, before being promoted to her current position with expanded access to client financial systems. Her employee access codes had been used to authorize dozens of suspicious transactions over the past 18 months, each one carefully structured to avoid triggering automatic fraud detection systems. The amounts involved were staggering. According to the FBI's analysis, over $2.3 million had been systematically stolen from the three companies Amanda had mentioned during dinner. The thefts had been carried out using sophisticated methods that required intimate knowledge of both the client accounts and the internal security procedures at Westfield Financial Solutions. But what made the situation even more disturbing was the pattern of recent activity. The fraudulent transactions had not stopped when the FBI began their investigation 6 weeks ago. If anything, they appeared to be accelerating, as if whoever was responsible was trying to steal as much money as possible before the scheme was discovered. I scrolled through bank transfer records that showed Amanda's digital signature on transactions that moved money from legitimate client accounts to fake vendor accounts that existed only on paper. Purchase orders for services that were never provided, payments to companies with no real employees or business addresses, sophisticated accounting manipulations that made stolen money appear like legitimate business expenses. The most recent transaction had occurred just 3 days earlier. Someone had authorized a payment of $75,000 from Summit Healthcare Group to a vendor called Pacific Coast Consulting Services for what was described as regulatory compliance analysis. Pacific Coast Consulting Services had no business license, no registered address, and no employees other than the person who had opened the bank account to receive the stolen funds. My phone buzzed again with another message from Marcus. FBI wants to know if you have any new information about suspect locations. They are planning arrests within next 2 weeks, but would prefer to apprehend subjects before any additional theft occurs. I stared at that message for several long seconds, processing the full implications of what was happening. The FBI was actively planning to arrest Amanda within the next 2 weeks, and I was the only person in the world who knew exactly where she would be at this moment. She was sitting in my parents' dining room, charming my family with stories about her successful career while being completely unaware that federal agents were closing in on her. But there was another complication that made this situation even more complex. Amanda was not just stealing money for her own benefit. According to the financial records Marcus had sent, she was working with at least one accomplice who helped coordinate the more sophisticated aspects of the scheme. Bank accounts had been opened using false identities, fake business licenses had been obtained for the fraudulent vendor companies, and someone with technical expertise had helped design the computer programs used to manipulate transaction records. The FBI suspected that Amanda's accomplice might be someone else at Westfield Financial Solutions, possibly someone in the information technology department who could help circumvent the company's internal security systems. But they had not yet been able to identify who that person might be, which meant Amanda might not be the only criminal my family was unknowingly entertaining tonight. I closed the encrypted files and tried to compose myself before returning to the dinner table. Walking back through the hallway, I could hear Amanda's voice carrying clearly from the dining room as she continued regaling everyone with stories about her important work. She was talking about her plans to take Tyler on an expensive vacation to Europe next month, describing the luxury hotels they would stay at and the fine restaurants where they would dine. That vacation, I now knew, was being funded with money stolen from companies that trusted Westfield Financial Solutions to protect their assets. Amanda was not just lying to my family about her character and her values. She was lying about the very source of her apparent success and financial stability. As I approached the dining room, I could see Tyler gazing at Amanda with obvious adoration, clearly excited about the prospect of traveling to Europe with someone who seemed so sophisticated and successful. Mom and Dad were asking her questions about her travel plans, offering suggestions about places to visit and things to see based on their own trip to Italy several years earlier. None of them had any idea that they were making vacation plans with someone who would probably be in federal custody before those plane tickets could be used. The cognitive dissonance was almost overwhelming. Here was my family finally approving of someone Tyler had brought home completely unaware that his perfect girlfriend was about to destroy his life in ways he could not possibly imagine. But as I sat back down at the table and listened to Amanda continue her performance, I realized that this situation presented me with an opportunity I had never expected. For the first time in years, I would have the chance to show my family exactly what kind of work I actually did and exactly how successful I had become at doing it. They wanted to know what I did all day in my mysterious computer job. Tonight, they were going to find out. I settled back into my chair and listened to Amanda continue her performance for several more minutes, watching as she effortlessly manipulated the conversation to maintain everyone's attention and admiration. She had an undeniable talent for reading people and telling them exactly what they wanted to hear, which probably explained how she had managed to steal over $2 million without arousing suspicion at her workplace. But Amanda was also getting careless in her confidence. The positive reception she was getting from my family seemed to be encouraging her to take bigger risks to reveal more details about her work than someone in her position should probably be sharing. She was enjoying the spotlight too much to be cautious about what she was saying. "You know what really bothers me about some people?" she said, glancing in my direction with that same sweet smile that barely concealed genuine malice. "It's when they are not honest about their limitations. Like there's nothing wrong with having a simple job or living a quiet life, but why pretend to be something you are not?" She was setting up for another attack on me, probably sensing that the family was still receptive to hearing more criticism of my mysterious career and unconventional lifestyle. But this time, instead of feeling defensive or embarrassed, I felt something different. For the first time in years, I had information that gave me real power in this room. "Amanda, before I answer that," I said calmly, placing my phone on the table in front of me, "I am curious about something you mentioned earlier. You said you handle account management for Bridgeway Industries, Coastal Manufacturing, and Summit Healthcare Group." Her expression shifted slightly, a brief flash of uncertainty crossing her features before she recovered her composure. "Yes, those are some of our most important clients. Why do you ask?" The rest of the table was watching this exchange with obvious interest, probably expecting me to say something that would embarrass myself even further. Tyler leaned back in his chair with an amused expression, clearly anticipating whatever awkward question his unsuccessful little brother was about to ask his sophisticated girlfriend. Well, I continued unlocking my phone and opening the secure folder containing our FBI case files. I was just wondering, because those are the exact 3 companies that my cybersecurity firm was hired to investigate for a massive embezzlement scheme involving over $2.3 million in fraudulent transactions. The dining room went completely silent. Mom stopped in the middle of clearing dessert plates. Dad lowered his coffee cup without taking a sip. Tyler's amused expression disappeared, replaced by something that looked like confusion, mixed with the first hint of concern. But Amanda's reaction was the most telling. Her face went pale so quickly that it looked like someone had drained the blood from her veins. For just a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped, completely revealing something that looked very much like panic before she managed to regain control. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, but her voice lacked the confidence she had been displaying all evening. "That is ridiculous. Those companies are completely legitimate, and Westfield Financial Solutions has impeccable security standards." I turned my phone screen toward Tyler, showing him the first page of the FBI case file that clearly identified Digital Fortress Investigations as the primary cybersecurity contractor for the investigation. "Tyler, I want you to look at this very carefully. This is a federal investigation into systematic theft from client accounts at Westfield Financial Solutions. Every fraudulent transaction has been traced back to employee access codes belonging to someone with administrative privileges. Tyler stared at the phone screen, his expression changing as he began to process what he was seeing. The FBI letterhead was unmistakable, as were the official case numbers and the detailed financial records, showing exactly how the stolen money had been moved through various accounts. Amanda tried to grab my phone, but I pulled it back before she could reach it. "Boston, this is insane," she said, her voice rising slightly as her composure began to crack. "You are making this up because you are jealous of my success. Those are completely false accusations." But I was not finished yet. I swiped to the next screen, which showed a detailed breakdown of the fraudulent transactions, including dates, amounts, and the digital signatures used to authorize each theft. "Amanda, every one of these transactions bears your employee access code and your digital signature. You have been systematically stealing money from your clients for over 18 months. The table erupted in chaos. Tyler demanded to see the phone screen for himself while Mom and Dad began asking questions that nobody seemed able to answer. Amanda stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass and sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. "This is completely false," she shouted, but her voice was shaking now and her hands were trembling. "I do not know how he got access to fake documents, but I am not going to sit here and listen to these lies." I stood up as well, holding my phone where everyone could see the screen. "These are not fake documents, Amanda. This is an active federal investigation, and you are the primary suspect. The FBI has been building a case against you for 6 weeks, and they already have enough evidence to ensure conviction." Tyler grabbed my arm, his face a mixture of anger and desperation. "Boston, what the hell is going on here? Are you seriously accusing Amanda of being a criminal?" I turned to face my brother directly, feeling something like sympathy for what he was about to learn about the woman he thought he loved. "Tyler, I am not just accusing her. I am telling you that she is currently under federal investigation for embezzling over $2 million from companies that trusted her to protect their money." Dad found his voice at that moment, though he sounded completely bewildered. "Boston, what exactly is your involvement in all this? How do you know about federal investigations?" I showed him my phone screen, scrolling to the page that displayed my official credentials as a licensed cybersecurity investigator working under contract with the FBI. Dad, Digital Fortress Investigations is not some made-up computer hobby. We are a federal contractor specializing in white-collar cybercrime. We have solved dozens of major fraud cases over the past 7 years. The look of shock on Dad's face was almost worth everything I had endured during the earlier part of the evening. He stared at my credentials for several long seconds, reading and rereading the official documentation that proved I was not just successful, but successful in exactly the kind of work that required real expertise and professional recognition. But Amanda was not going to go down without a fight. Realizing that her perfect evening was falling apart around her, she decided to try one last desperate gambit to regain control of the situation. "Tyler, you cannot believe this," she said, moving to stand behind his chair and placing her hands on his shoulders. "Your brother is obviously jealous of our relationship, and he is making up these crazy stories to try to break us up. Think about it logically. Do I seem like someone who would steal money? I have a good job. I make my own money. I do not need to steal from anyone." For a moment, I could see Tyler wavering. Amanda was appealing to his desire to believe that his perfect girlfriend was exactly who she appeared to be, while I was asking him to accept that he had been completely fooled by someone he was planning to build a future with. But then I played my final card. I dialed a number on my phone and put the call on speaker so everyone at the table could hear both sides of the conversation. "Agent Patricia Hawkins, FBI Financial Crimes Division," came the crisp professional voice from the phone speaker. "Agent Hawkins, This is Boston Miller from Digital Fortress Investigations. I am looking at suspect Amanda Richardson right now, and I think you need to know her current location." The silence that followed that statement was deafening. Amanda's face went from pale to gray, and she stumbled backward as if someone had physically pushed her. Tyler stared at the phone in complete shock, finally beginning to understand that this was not some elaborate joke or misunderstanding. "Oh, Mr. Miller." Agent Hawkins replied, "We have been looking for Ms. Richardson for 3 days. Can you confirm her current address?" Amanda broke at that moment the weight of 18 months of stolen money and federal scrutiny, finally crushing her ability to maintain the pretense. "Tyler," she whispered, "I can explain everything. I was going to tell you after my promotion. I was going to pay it all back." But Tyler was no longer listening to her explanations. He was staring at my phone as Agent Hawkins continued speaking, describing the scope of the investigation and the evidence they had compiled against Amanda. His face was a map of betrayal and disbelief, the painful realization that everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved was a carefully constructed lie. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of chaos revelations and the systematic destruction of everything my family thought they knew about both Amanda and me. Agent Hawkins remained on the phone coordinating with local FBI agents, while Amanda alternately tried to run hide and convince Tyler that somehow this was all a misunderstanding that could be explained away with enough time and patience. But there would be no time and no patience for explanations. Within 15 minutes, 2 black SUVs pulled into my parents' driveway, and 4 FBI agents in dark suits walked through our front door with arrest warrants and evidence collection equipment. Amanda made one last desperate attempt to flee, pushing past Tyler and running toward the back door that led to the kitchen and the rear exit of the house. But Agent Hawkins had anticipated that possibility, and agents were already positioned in the backyard to prevent any escape attempts. She was brought back into the dining room in handcuffs, her designer dress wrinkled, and her perfect makeup smeared from crying. The transformation was startling. The confident, sophisticated woman who had spent the evening mocking me and charming my family was gone, replaced by someone who looked young and terrified, and completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening to her. Tyler watched in stunned silence as the agents read Amanda her rights and explained the charges against her. Federal embezzlement wire fraud, money laundering computer crimes, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Each charge carried potential prison sentences that could add up to decades behind bars if she was convicted on all counts. "Tyler, please," Amanda begged as the agents prepared to escort her to their vehicle. "I love you. I was going to tell you everything after we got back from Europe. I was going to pay all the money back and start over. Please do not let them do this to me." But Tyler could not even look at her anymore. The woman he thought he was going to marry had been systematically stealing money for over a year, lying to him about every aspect of her life, and planning an expensive vacation using funds she had stolen from companies that trusted her to protect their assets. "How much of it was real?" he asked quietly, finally meeting her eyes for what would be the last time. "How much of anything you told me was actually true?" Amanda opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. The question was too large and too painful for any response that would not make things worse. Instead, she just stood there crying as the agents led her away, leaving behind a dining room full of people who were struggling to process everything that had just happened. After the FBI agents left with Amanda and their evidence collection materials, the house felt strangely quiet. The 4 of us sat around the dining table in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts about how drastically the evening had deviated from what any of us had expected. Dad was the first to speak his voice, carrying a tone of bewilderment mixed with something that might have been regret. "Boston, I had no idea about your work." When you said security consulting, I never imagined you meant federal investigations and FBI contracts. I showed him my phone again, scrolling through our company website and the case studies that documented Digital Fortress Investigations' track record over the past 7 years. Major corporate fraud cases, cybersecurity breaches affecting Fortune 500 companies' identity theft rings that had stolen millions of dollars from consumers across multiple states. We have prevented over $50 million in losses since Marcus and I started the company, I explained. Most of our clients are law firms and corporations that need sophisticated cybersecurity analysis for litigation or regulatory compliance. The FBI contracts are actually a relatively small part of our business, but they are often the most interesting cases we work on. Mom picked up my phone and scrolled through the company information with obvious amazement. Boston, this is incredible. Why did not you ever tell us about any of this? We had no idea you were involved in such important work. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. Why had I never told them? The answer was complicated, involving pride and stubbornness, and the gradual erosion of trust that occurs when people consistently undervalue your efforts and accomplishments. I tried to explain what I did for the first few years, I said, finally. But every time I mentioned cybersecurity or federal investigations or corporate fraud, you would change the subject back to Tyler's sales achievements or ask when I was going to get a real job like his. Eventually, I stopped trying to convince people who had already decided I was unsuccessful. Tyler had been silent throughout this conversation, staring down at the table and occasionally shaking his head, as if he still could not believe what had just happened. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She was going to steal money and disappear, was not she? He asked. The whole relationship, the vacation plans, everything. It was all just part of her exit strategy. I wished I could tell him otherwise, but the evidence was too clear to allow for comforting lies. Tyler, the FBI thinks she was planning to steal as much as possible over the next few months and then disappear with a new identity. The vacation to Europe was probably going to be a one-way trip. He put his head in his hands and began crying. Then the full weight of betrayal finally hitting him. The woman he had fallen in love with, the person he had been planning to build a future with, had been systematically deceiving him, while committing federal crimes that would have eventually destroyed his own reputation and possibly his freedom if he had unknowingly become involved. How did I not see it? He asked. How was I so completely fooled by someone who was lying about everything? It was a fair question, and one that investigators asked after every major fraud case. How do intelligent, successful people get manipulated by criminals who seem so convincing and trustworthy? The answer I had learned over the years was that the best con artists were also the most charming people. They succeeded because they were genuinely skilled at making others feel special and appreciated. She was very good at what she did, I told Tyler. Con artists succeed because they tell people exactly what they want to hear. You wanted to believe you had found someone special, and she was excellent at playing that role. Dad interrupted our conversation with a question that surprised me. Boston, can you forgive us for how we treated you tonight? For how we have treated you over the years? The question caught me off guard because I had not expected any acknowledgement of wrongdoing, much less an actual apology. For years, I had assumed that my family's criticism and lack of support were simply facts of life that I would have to learn to live with. Dad, I said carefully, I know you and Mom always wanted what you thought was best for me. We just had different ideas about what success looks like and how to achieve it. But he shook his head emphatically, clearly not satisfied with that diplomatic response. No, son, we were wrong. We judged you based on appearances and assumptions instead of taking the time to understand what you were actually accomplishing. You built something impressive and important, and instead of being proud of you, we made you feel ashamed of your success. The conversation continued for another hour, covering years of accumulated misunderstandings, and missed opportunities for real communication. My parents asked detailed questions about Digital Fortress investigations, expressing genuine curiosity about the work Marcus and I had been doing, while they were dismissing it as some kind of glorified hobby. Tyler wanted to know about the specific case that had led to Amanda's arrest, and I walked him through the investigation process from beginning to end. How the FBI had first contacted us after discovering suspicious financial activity at Westfield Financial Solutions. How we had used digital forensics to trace the stolen money through various accounts, and how Amanda's employee access codes had been connected to every fraudulent transaction. The irony, I told him, is that if she had not mentioned those specific company names tonight, it might have taken us weeks or months to identify her as the primary suspect. She essentially confessed to federal crimes while trying to impress everyone with her professional accomplishments. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave the family, dynamics had shifted in ways that would have been impossible to imagine just a few hours earlier. Instead of being the disappointing younger son who could not get his life together, I was suddenly someone whose expertise had protected them from associating with a criminal who might have eventually dragged Tyler into serious legal trouble. But more than that, the experience had forced all of us to confront the assumptions and prejudices that had been shaping our relationships for years. My parents realized they had been judging me based on superficial criteria while ignoring evidence of real success. Tyler learned that charm and beauty could mask criminal behavior, and that his supposedly unsuccessful brother actually had insights worth listening to. Most importantly, we had all learned that family relationships require more than good intentions. They require genuine effort to understand and support each other, even when that support challenges our preconceived notions about success and failure. 3 weeks later, Amanda Richardson pleaded guilty to all charges in federal court, accepting a plea agreement that would send her to prison for 15 years in exchange for her cooperation in identifying additional victims of similar fraud schemes. The local news covered her case extensively, describing her as a sophisticated con artist who had stolen over $2.3 million while maintaining the facade of a successful young professional. Tyler came to visit my office downtown for the first time since Amanda's arrest, walking through the modern workspace that Marcus and I had built to house Digital Fortress investigations and our team of 12 cybersecurity specialists. The office occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass building overlooking the Sacramento River, with views that stretched from the Capitol building to the Sierra Nevada mountains on clear days. "I had no idea," he said, standing in our main conference room and looking at the wall display that showed real-time cybersecurity monitoring for our various corporate clients. "When you said you worked in computer security, I pictured someone sitting alone in a basement fixing people's email problems." I gave him a tour of our facilities, explaining how we used sophisticated software to analyze financial records for evidence of fraud, how our team worked with law enforcement agencies across the country, and how the company had grown from 2 people in a rented office to a multi-million-dollar operation with clients throughout the western United States. Marcus was impressed when I introduced him to Tyler, mainly because he had heard me complain for years about my family's lack of interest in our work. "Your brother is one of the most talented investigators I have ever worked with," Marcus told Tyler. "Half the cases we solve are because Boston can see patterns and connections that everyone else misses." But the most meaningful conversation happened the following Sunday at our family dinner, which had taken on a completely different tone since Amanda's arrest. Dad called me early that morning to apologize, his voice carrying a weight of regret that I had never heard before. "Boston, I have been thinking about what happened, and I realize I owe you a much bigger apology than I gave you that night," he said. "Your mother and I spent years making you feel like your choices were wrong, when really we were just too narrow-minded to understand what you were building." Mom got on the extension to add her own thoughts to the conversation. "Sweetheart, I am so ashamed of how we treated you. When I think about all the times we compared you unfavorably to Tyler, when you were actually more successful than any of us realized. I feel sick to my stomach." The family dinner that Sunday was unlike any gathering we had shared in years. Instead of focusing on Tyler's latest sales achievements or my parents' concerns about my unconventional career path, we spent hours talking about the work Digital Fortress Investigations was doing to protect businesses and individuals from cybercrime. Tyler asked thoughtful questions about our investigative methods, genuinely curious about how we had managed to solve cases that had stumped law enforcement agencies. Mom and Dad wanted to know about our other clients and the types of crimes we typically encountered, expressing amazement at the scope and sophistication of modern financial fraud. "I keep thinking about how confident Amanda was," Tyler said at one point. "She genuinely seemed to believe that she was smarter than everyone else, that she would never get caught because her methods were too sophisticated for anyone to detect. It was a common trait among white-collar criminals," I explained. "The same intelligence and charm that allowed them to commit complex financial crimes also convinced them that they were too clever to be caught by traditional investigative methods. But cybersecurity analysis could trace digital fingerprints through transactions in ways that most criminals did not understand or anticipate. The hardest part for me," Tyler continued, "is accepting how completely I was fooled. I prided myself on being a good judge of character, but Amanda manipulated me for months without me having any idea who she really was." Dad offered his own perspective on that painful realization. "Son, we were all fooled by her, and we were all fooling ourselves about Boston at the same time. Sometimes the people we think we understand best are actually strangers to us, while the people we think we understand least are the ones who deserve our trust and respect." The conversation turned to broader questions about family relationships and the assumptions we make about success and failure. Mom admitted that she had been so focused on traditional markers of achievement that she had missed evidence of real accomplishment happening right in front of her. "I kept waiting for you to get a normal job and wear a suit to work," she told me. "But you were already more successful than most people in suits could ever hope to be. I was looking for the wrong things and missing what actually mattered." Cousin Sarah called later that evening to apologize for her comments during the dinner and to ask if Digital Fortress Investigations might be able to help her husband's company improve their cybersecurity measures. She had done some research after Amanda's arrest and realized that small businesses were often targeted by exactly the kinds of fraud schemes we specialized in detecting and preventing. "Jake is really embarrassed about what he said that night," she explained. "He had no idea that cybersecurity was such a sophisticated field, or that you were working with the FBI on major criminal cases. He would love to talk with you about protecting his company from the kinds of problems Amanda was causing for her clients." The weeks that followed brought a stream of similar conversations. Neighbors, family, friends, and distant relatives who had previously dismissed my career as some kind of computer hobby were suddenly interested in learning about cybersecurity and the services Digital Fortress Investigations provided. Word spread through our social network that I had been instrumental in solving a major federal fraud case, and people began to understand that our work was both important and successful. But the most significant change was in my relationship with Tyler. For the first time in our adult lives, we began spending time together as equals rather than as the successful older brother and his disappointing sibling. He started asking for advice about business decisions, recognizing that my experience investigating corporate fraud had given me insights into how businesses actually operated behind the scenes. "I realize now that I never really knew you," he told me during one of our conversations. "I thought I was the one who understood how the world worked, but you were seeing things I was completely blind to. You knew there was something wrong with Amanda before any of the rest of us had a clue." The truth was more complicated than that, I explained. I had not initially suspected Amanda of being a criminal when I first met her. What had made me suspicious were the specific company names she mentioned and the way she described her work responsibilities. Without the background knowledge from our FBI investigation, I might have been just as fooled by her performance as everyone else had been. But that is exactly my point, Tyler responded. You had the knowledge and experience to recognize warning signs that the rest of us missed. You have been solving problems and building expertise while I was just focused on making sales quotas and impressing people with superficial accomplishments. 6 months after Amanda's sentencing, Dad surprised me by asking if he could visit Digital Fortress Investigations during normal business hours to see our operation when it was fully active. He wanted to understand what my typical workday looked like and how our investigative process actually functioned. I gave him a comprehensive tour, showing him how we analyzed financial records for evidence of fraud, how we worked with law enforcement agencies to build cases that would hold up in federal court, and how our preventive services helped companies protect themselves from cyber criminals before any theft occurred. "I am proud of you, son," he said, as we stood in my office looking out at the city skyline. "I am proud of what you have built here, and I am sorry it took me so long to understand what you were accomplishing. You found a way to make the world a safer place while building something lasting and meaningful." The experience taught all of us important lessons about judgment, assumption, and the difference between appearance and reality. Amanda had seemed successful and trustworthy because she knew how to project confidence and sophistication, while I had seemed unsuccessful because I did not fit traditional models of professional achievement. But beneath the surface, Amanda was stealing millions of dollars and planning to disappear with the proceeds while I was building a legitimate business that protected people from exactly the kinds of crimes she was committing. The contrast between appearance and reality could not have been more stark or more instructive. I learned that sometimes the people who judge us most harshly are the ones who need our forgiveness most. My parents' criticism had hurt for years, but their inability to see my success was really a reflection of their own limitations rather than my failures. And sometimes protecting your family means showing them painful truths they do not want to see, even when those truths challenge their fundamental assumptions about the world. Tyler learned that charm and confidence can mask criminal behavior, and that real success requires more than superficial markers of achievement. He also learned that the family member he had dismissed as unsuccessful was actually the one with the insights and expertise that could protect him from making serious mistakes. My parents learned that success comes in many forms, and that their quiet son had been accomplishing more than they realized while they were focused on traditional measures of professional achievement. They learned to ask better questions and listen more carefully before making judgments about people's lives and choices. Most importantly, we all learned that real love survives uncomfortable honesty. The painful experience of Amanda's arrest and the revelations about my actual career forced us to confront years of misunderstanding and missed communication. But instead of driving us apart, the honesty brought us closer together than we had been in decades. Our family dinners now feature genuine curiosity about each other's work and lives, rather than superficial comparisons and veiled criticisms. Tyler and I have developed a friendship based on mutual respect rather than sibling rivalry. Mom and Dad ask thoughtful questions about cybersecurity and express genuine pride in the company Marcus and I have built. The experience also reinforced my belief in the importance of patience and persistence when dealing with people who do not understand what you are trying to accomplish. It would have been easy to write off my family as unsupportive and focus exclusively on work relationships where my expertise was recognized and valued. But maintaining those family connections, even when they were difficult, eventually led to much deeper and more meaningful relationships. Amanda's criminal behavior had consequences that extended far beyond her own prison sentence. Several other employees at Westfield Financial Solutions were fired when the investigation revealed security lapses that had enabled her theft. The company faced lawsuits from clients who had lost money, and their reputation in the Sacramento business community was permanently damaged. But there were also positive outcomes from the investigation. Digital Fortress Investigations received several new contracts from companies that wanted to improve their cybersecurity measures after learning about Amanda's sophisticated fraud scheme. The FBI asked us to develop training materials for other law enforcement agencies dealing with similar financial crimes. Most meaningfully, the experience taught all of us that family relationships require more than good intentions. They require genuine effort to understand and support each other, even when that support challenges our preconceived notions about success and failure. They require looking beyond surface appearances to understand what people are actually accomplishing and why their choices make sense from their perspective. As I reflect on everything that happened, I am grateful for the painful dinner that forced these conversations and revelations. Without Amanda's criminal behavior creating a crisis that demanded honesty, we might have continued our superficial family relationships for years, never addressing the assumptions and judgments that were keeping us from really knowing and supporting each other. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what really matters and what really works. In our case, that crisis showed us that love, honesty, and respect are more important than traditional success markers, and that real family bonds can survive and even strengthen when tested by difficult truths. Have you ever had a moment when someone you trusted turned out to be completely different from who you thought they were? I would love to hear your stories about how you handled betrayal or discovered hidden truths about people in your life. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more content about real-life lessons and family dynamics. Sharing this video with others who might benefit from its message would mean a lot to me, and I hope it helps start important conversations about honesty and judgment in your own relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you to look beyond appearances and value substance over style in your own life and relationships.